David Liggett with Data Center Hawk. Focus on cloud and colocation, data center industry trends, and dynamic market. Hey, I'm David Liggett with Data Center Hawk, and I am so excited to be joined by Bruce Lehrman. Bruce is the CEO of Involta. Bruce, thanks so much for jumping on today. It's fun to be with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I look forward to the episode today.
Before we begin, so I think one of the things that's really interesting about your background is your experience with entrepreneurship. And, you've started a number of companies, obviously Involta being one of those. But just talk about your experience starting the companies that you have and then what led you to begin Involta, I think over 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm entrepreneurial in general, and I've gotten a lot of help from other entrepreneurs, and I think that's the great thing about entrepreneurship in general is the people that have built great companies are always willing to listen and provide feedback and guidance as other entrepreneurs are starting their path. And so I did start a streaming media company back in the mid 90s. And, being from Dallas, you're probably familiar with Mark Cuban, and he was doing broadcast.com. And that streaming media industry was so nascent then that there was like 4 or 5 companies that were doing it. So kind of in trade shows and that we'd be like right across the aisle from each other and chatting. He's a really great guy, by the way, and super smart. And obviously he's turned out to be quite successful.
Sure.
One of the things that was interesting, we started, it was hard to get high quality internet back in those days. And so there was a new data center that opened up in Palo Alto Internet Exchange. And it was back then you really had to know somebody to be able to get a couple servers slid into that thing that was, way overstocked with servers and things. And I love that industry. I just like the real estate component and the network, and it just kind of fit who I wanted to do in terms of a business. So I watched that industry kind of develop and grow, and it was a little overbuilt, and then the dot-com bubble burst, and so there was a lot of excess capacity. But by 2005, 2006, people started building new data centers again, and that capacity had been absorbed. And a friend of mine asked what to do. He had a data center that was abandoned by a telco, and I said, well, let me take a look at it. And that's, I looked at that and I said, well, I think I know what to do with that. So we started Involta and, then continued to build out data centers in emerging markets.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really interesting things about the Involta portfolio as far as like the markets that, you're today located in. But I also think your comment about just how this business, started and you obviously being in the beginning stages of that, we saw telco assets that over time, got changed into, very sophisticated assets that were serving the greater needs of different types of companies. And so, but talk about your portfolio. Why have you chosen to locate in the, cities and states that the portfolio is in today?
Yeah. It's a great question. We started the business with the thought around providing that world-class data center experience in markets that were underserved. And so, there's 8 to 10 markets around the country, and especially back then, that had access to world-class data center facilities. But yet there was a lot of IT workload in hospitals and manufacturing organizations that didn't want to move to, LA or Chicago or New York or, a lot of the, DC. And so, that was really the underlying concept for us, is to build that capability in markets that people wanted to keep their workload closer. And, again, we started off with a retrofit of telco, and then historically we've been really more in the mindset of we build, own, and operate from scratch, new facilities. So that's the bulk of our platform around the country now, in markets like Boise, Idaho, and Tucson, Arizona, and far east is Cleveland, Pittsburgh, again, kind of these markets that are, a little bit off the beaten path.
Yeah, and I would say that they're really interesting today from a growth perspective. I think if people follow the industry, you would know that those markets, those secondary markets, are becoming much more maybe down the fairway because of the importance of network, the importance of of being closer to the end user themselves. So certainly those markets are interesting. One of the things that's interesting in looking at your company is the different industry verticals that you all serve. One of them is healthcare, and that's definitely been an industry that has been evolving over time. But talk about Involta's approach to serving the healthcare industry from a data center perspective. What's that been like?
Yeah, it's really interesting that the healthcare industry, to your point, really focused on network latency from their core data centers and their backup facilities to their primary hospitals and clinics. And so it was a natural fit for us, as we build a facility that really caters towards kind of that large enterprise, mid-sized enterprise organization with all of the security compliance and that you'd expect in that mid to large enterprise organization. So the healthcare organizations, were first to kind of respond to us moving into new markets because they were looking at their aged data centers and their strategy and really looking to start that partnership with somebody that would be their data center partner for them and still meet the requirements or exceed the requirements that they had in their own facilities. And then to your point, that latency is a big thing for the healthcare organizations. They're doing surgeries by wire now, and so they're looking at monitors that are going back to our data centers, and you definitely need to be have resiliency, uptime, and you don't want to see a whole lot of latency in that situation.
Yeah, and that's been really interesting to watch as I think that the healthcare industry has evolved and how much more we depend on the delivery, the instantaneous delivery of data and information. And while I still think there's a long way to go, I think we probably both agree in that industry. But there have been a lot of improvements over the last several years. From your standpoint, sitting as a leader of your company, what are some of the other industry verticals maybe that you all are focusing on, whether it's financial or technology companies? What have been some of the companies that have been driving demand over the last several years?
Yeah, so again, we're focused kind of in those markets, secondary markets, and really focused on that mid to large enterprise organization. So we've really found a lot of growth in the manufacturing environment, and especially as you think about like Northeast Ohio, Western PA, just a lot of good manufacturing organizations in that region. And so we've built a vertical around manufacturing as well, and just rolled out our first advisory board on manufacturing earlier this year. Unfortunately, it was virtual, but we'll do an in-person one this fall. So the manufacturing one is another organization type of business that really is focused on latency, and we think in terms of the go forward strategy. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about kind of our edge platform, but manufacturing is one of those that's really focused on how they start deploying more of the edge as well. The other vertical that we've really seen a lot of traction with is the financial services market. We define that somewhat broadly, but it includes insurance organizations, financial services firms, that sort of thing. But again, they're really focused on compliance and security and uptime, and it really fits well within our strategy. And so we've also created an advisory group around the financial services industry.
So talk about those advisory groups and how, first of all, the purpose of them, and then what do you all try to use them to do, as it relates to Involta and current customers.
Yeah. And so we've created our advisory board of both customers and non-customers, and really it's to help us define what are the products and services that industry specifically needs to be able to continue to grow and scale. And we want to make sure that we continue to stay out on the forefront of what their requirements look like today and in the future. And it's really been great. I mean, the healthcare one, we've been using them since 2015. And we'll come to them with a strategic plan and then a bunch of crazy ideas, and we'll sift that down into a few that make sense, and we'll move forward. And I think one of the nice things about our advisory board is they've seen it's not just a we get together once a year, twice a year and talk about things, but, we actually come back through and say, here are the things that we discussed at our last advisory board meeting. Here are the things that we've implemented. Here's what we've done, or here's where we're, in flight on some of these things. And here's some things that, we thought were good ideas back with the last time we spoke, but, we've kind of done some more work and realized that we don't think that
Sure.
these are good, and this is why. And so it's really been a good working group, and it's not just a fluff group. So I think that's what, the advisory board members feel good about.
You mentioned edge before, but talk about that and just maybe some other technologies or improvements that you believe will take place in the next several years that will impact the industry.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked about our beginning in co-location and data centers, and it's an evolution, and the market changes, and the requirements of our customers continue to evolve. And so we started off as a primarily co-location only company. Started building our own private cloud capability within 3 or 4 or 5 years, something like that. Now that's about 50% of our business. We've added in the last couple of years public cloud capability. So now really helping our clients and prospective clients decide where those workloads best belong, whether it's colo, whether it's in our cloud, or whether it's in the public cloud, and really helping be a good IT partner for our customers. And then the next kind of iteration, I think, of this evolution is we're seeing the move to the edge, and organizations wanting to move that workload even closer to where the consumers of that workload are. And so we're seeing, a lot of movement from the big manufacturers are completely redesigning their kind of strategy and their architecture to say, over the last 20, 25 years, we really focused on centralizing IT workloads into a couple locations.
Mm-hmm.
And now all that architecture is changing over the next 20 to 25 years will be to move all that into a decentralized way. So, we're really fortunate, I think, in a lot of ways, that we're already kind of in a lot of these edge markets, and think that there's a lot of opportunity for us going forward. And I think, as we think about the growth over the next, let's say 10 years, we think edge is going to be a major player.
Yeah, it feels like you are, in the position and geographically and also from maybe a technology perspective, where the market is moving. And, I'm sure as leader of a company, that's exactly where you want to be. When you think about growing, one of the things that we do here at Data Center Hawk is we're looking at different markets and how they're growing from a size perspective, demand perspective. I'm curious, as you sit and think about, hey, how do we grow our portfolio down the road? What are some of the things that you think about that help guide those decisions?
Yeah, so we really look at kind of the opportunities for can we be successful in different markets. So we think about growing geographically, and I think with the movement towards edge, you'll see us work on more geographic expansion. We also look at technological expansion. So as we think about edge, what are those tools and capabilities that we need to add to our organization for us to continue to be able to kind of scale over that next 10 years. So those are the two areas I think that we really focus on most, is geographic expansion and then capability expansion.
So Bruce, one of the things that I always am asking data center leaders is, why they believe this is such a good industry to invest time, energy, resources in as a younger professional. We have an industry that is lacking, new entrants, whether it's engineers, facility managers, just people plugged into the technology side of our space. And so, from your perspective, what makes this such an interesting industry to get involved in?
Yeah, well, it is interesting. When you think about all of the technology that is emerging in the world, I mean, all that stuff is grounded somewhere in a data center. And one of the exciting things for me is just meeting all of the people and leaders that are running all these companies, and some of them, just it's bizarre things that people make money on, and but technology is really at the root of it, the core of it. So I love the opportunity to meet and listen to everybody's story about the businesses they've created and how this technology is such a critical component of it. the bottom line is there aren't just technology companies. Every company is a technology
Yep.
company, and everybody needs to have, their services in one fashion or another. And I think that's the opportunity for organizations like ours and others. Just everybody's a potential customer at this point.
Well, Bruce, thanks so much for taking the time to talk this morning. It's really interesting to learn about Involta, and we'll be excited to watch your success and the company's growth moving forward.
That sounds great. Thanks so much. Appreciate the time today.